I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. Tuesday, October 24th, a joint special workshop of the Oconee County Council and Planning Commission. When I was asked to think about the agenda for this meeting, I decided to throw in a short discussion of the general direction, vision for the county regarding further growth and development. Because if there's one thing I'm certain about, we're not all on the same page. And so if you were to ask me today for my own vision of the county for further growth and development, I would tell you that, yes, I would like a few extra shopping options along 123, but other than that, if nothing ever changed here, I'd be fine with that. One of the reasons I moved here was because there was some elbow room. I moved here from Tampa, Florida. When I purchased my home in Tampa, Florida, there was nothing but orange groves and cattle around my house. And 23 years later, every inch of land is paved, and the only orange trees were the ones in my backyard with no cattle to be seen. So we moved further north because there was space here. And that's how I personally like it. And so, like I said, I thought it was prudent to talk a little bit about where we're going and why and how we're going to get there. So I'd like to open the first discussion for anyone that has some comments on that topic. Don't be shy.
I'll take a stand, Madam Chairman.
Oh, one more thing. I was asked to make sure you're aware that we strung all kinds of wires down here for the microphones, etc. So as you're walking about, please be careful. Is that correct? Okay. Okay, go ahead, Glenn. Sorry.
First of all, I would like to thank you, plus the rest of these members, I'm sure, for the time that you served Oconee County. The Hippocratic Oath has three Latin words in it that mean do no harm. In other words, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And next, I want to remind you of something that your grandparents, parents, and your early year school teachers taught you, and even Jesus taught it to his disciples. It's called the Golden Rule. It's to do unto others as you'd have them to do unto you, to paraphrase it. But you can also say, do unto others property as you would have them to do unto your property. Or do unto other freedoms and rights as you'd have them to do unto your freedoms and rights. The word empathy, I think, comes from the Golden Rule. It has to do with the identity of persons and objects, putting yourself in those places. So there's a gentleman here, I won't call his name, but he spent several $100,000 on some property on US 76 and 123 bypass between Clemson and Sunapee. And I think by the use of empathy, that's placing yourself in his position, you will feel sympathy. And after the sympathy, you'll feel compassion, and then pity, and then misfortune. And this misfortune was not brought on by this gentleman. He only exercised his individual rights as a property owner. Individual rights, according to Google, refers to the liberties of each individual to pursue life and the goals without interference from other individuals and government. Individual rights includes the rights for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as stated in the U.S. Declaration of Independence. The first Congress passed 12 amendments to the Constitution. 10 of those were ratified by the states. They were known as the Bill of Rights. The property rights for an individual is brought about by Article 15. I'm a middle-of-the-road person. It's not a lot that excites me, but I'd like to be known as a fanatic about individual rights and the rights of an individual property owner to do what he wants to do on his property. Thank you.
Okay, can we answer my question, though? Okay, take a stab at this one, too. What is your vision for the county regarding further growth and development?
You want me to do that? Yes, I'll be glad to take that question. I think that, and some of these people are not gonna like this, we're open for business. And some of the things that we're restricting businesses on are clouding our way of going for it to attract businesses. So some of this stuff that we're doing, I think we need to probably let Mr. Blackwell go if we're gonna go the direction of trying to hold back businesses. If not, let's go full speed ahead. Thank you.
Okay, any more comments?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Mr. Gremlin come by my shop last weekend, and he warned me, he said, you better look at that thing closely, what you got in the mail. Well, me knowing old Andy for what he is, he's a man of his word, I read it over. And I'm thinking, this ain't happening. This is unbelievable. How's this happening? I'm gonna reserve my tirade and anger for later. But to sum this whole thing up, Hitler tried this post-war, pre-war, Germany, when he said the Jewish people, they gotta pay fees to use this, the Jewish people can't really own the property because the property belongs to the Aryan, blonde-haired, blue-eyed race, and we're doing this. I want this drilled into your heads. Hitler said, he's a piece of garbage too, we're doing this to protect our lifestyles. We're doing this to protect you, the people. We're not interested in hurting the Jewish people. We're just only want to do to protect your lifestyles. And look what it turned out to be when everybody opened their eyes. And this whole thing here, sent to me in the mail, is nothing but the same thing, just with a little bit of different twist on it. And it is sickening, absolutely sickening. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Mr. McCall, I take serious issue with your characterization of corridor planning or any other type of planning as one of the worst, equated to one of the worst atrocities that we know about since the history of the world. That's absurd. And it galls me that you would compare the two. Have some respect. My vision for the future is something that our kids will be proud of. That they won't say, man, if only we would have planned, we wouldn't look like we do now. We have opportunities to stop what many places, I guarantee you if you go to them, would say, man, I wish we would have planned better. I wish that we would have talked about this. This does not need to be some sort of contentious meeting. And I can't believe those comments, but this is talking about coming together and figuring out how to plan this community. If we do not plan it, the developers plan it for us. And Ms. Kamick, I agree with you. I would like some more shopping options, and I would like for things to stay pretty much the way they are from a from a development standpoint. I love green spaces, and I love, being able to drive down Highway 28 and see the mountains, and in some parts of it aren't even obscured by billboards. But we know, logic tells us that this area will grow, people will continue to move here, traffic will get worse, and at a certain point, we become landlocked and cannot expand our transportation infrastructure. And then we have congestion, backups, people decide to stop driving through here, they drive around us, and that affects negatively many metrics of why people want to come here. If folks feel like they've got all these people moving here from Atlanta, moving here from Charlotte, moving here from big cities, they want to move here because it doesn't take them an hour to get to the grocery store. And some people like living in rural areas and don't mind taking an hour to get to the grocery store. But that's because they live on the top of a mountain, not because they're stuck in traffic for 15 miles. And that's what I'm concerned about. Do we want to be a place where our kids are proud, or do we want to be a place where our kids or children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren say, man, I wish they would have planned it so we would have something to take over that we can build on, not something we're trying to correct retroactively. And that's what I'm concerned about. This doesn't need to be a contentious argument, and it certainly doesn't need to be compared to Nazi-era Germany. But this is important to the future of this county, and we need to take it seriously. But we need to talk through these things and not just say, well, throw all of it out because it's planned. So that's all I've got there. But let's have respect for each other and have respect for the process. This is a democratic government. It's a representative government, and this is certainly not anything that's being handed down from a dictator.
Madam Chair, if I may, thank you for working through this and setting this up. Appreciate all that the planning department does. I know it's no easy task to try to figure out what everybody wants, and unfortunately, one of the number one calls that I get is what somebody else is doing with their property, and that's where it's the hardest thing to try to do this and to try to plan and try to think about this, is because, yes, we are, free will. We can do whatever we want to do. But when our rights start infringing on the rights of those around us, that's where I have the issue. And on multiple occasions, I see, property infringements on the guy next door to you. Well, you have the right to do certain things with your property, but unfortunately, you don't have the right to do anything you want to do with your property. That's why we have, that's why we have police, that's why we have rules, that's why we have order. And that's why our parents taught us how to take care of our stuff. What I see the future of Oconee County, and the reason why I spend the time that I do in here away from my family and away from things that I love to do, is for the commitment to my county and to my peers and to the future of generations, not just my kids, but their kids. I see Oconee as a natural resource place. I see the wonderful things that we have on there. We can't hide what we have. Everybody knows, everybody's coming here. It's not the population that's growing, it's the amount of cars coming in here that continues to grow. I mean, the traffic studies and everything that I've seen have more than doubled, and the ability to drive in Oconee County safely from an insurance point is really, really difficult right now. That has become the amount of wrecks and everything that we're having on the 123 and the back roads is that because of tourism? It's 50-50. It's a lot of things that's going on because people are discovering Oconee. We're advertising Oconee, and people love Oconee. Are they necessarily coming here to live? 50-50. I know people that come here 3 times a year. I know people that have second and, homes here. This is actually where they want to retire. And that's because of what we have here. It's because of the people that we have here. It's because of the lifestyle that we have here. Some of the things that I see on, with, to answer your question, future growth and development, a professional environment, the amount of economic development that we have going on here and the jobs that we're bringing here are unbelievable. I've got friends in Greenville right now. He interviewed for a job, and he's fixing to leave his Greenville job to come here and move back to Oconee because he's from here. He moved away from here because of the opportunity. To me, that's what I see Oconee as, a future professional environment for bringing people back and raising their family here. That's what I see us trending. I don't like a lot of change. I'm not looking for Gatlinburg. Lord knows I can visit Gatlinburg anytime I want to. That's not what I see Oconee. It's a natural area, and I like it that way. But we can't keep people out, but we, better do something about the safety and the traffic here to control that growth. Thank you.
Planning Commission, chime in. You called this meeting.
Madam Chairman, I'll speak up unless somebody else wants to go first. I've been told by many people, which I consider wise, that change will happen. And you can either be a part of structuring that change and directing that change, or you can sit back and watch that change just occur. In 2017, one of the big publications noticed Lake Keowee as the #1 lake in the United States. In 2016, New York Magazine published Oconee County as the #1 place to retire in South Carolina, and the #15th place in the United States to retire. In 2015 or 14, National Geographic's had an article about this area as being one of the 50 must-see places in the world. So people are coming to this area for one reason or another. I think that it's part of the process that is required that we determine, since people are coming here, how that area is going to look. I think when we talk about the future growth or further growth, we're talking about the future growth. And in doing so, I think it's our responsibility here to help determine what that growth looks like. I moved to the area like you because I like it just like it is. And if I could snap my fingers and keep it that way, wouldn't it be wonderful? But that's not going to happen, and we know that that's not going to happen. So since it's not going to happen and growth is going to happen, being able to structure that, I think, and plan it correctly is a good thing. One more thing on that. 20-something years ago, Greenville County said we want to become the #1 automotive area in the southern part of the United States. And that foresight 20 years ago has now allowed them to become a huge automotive mecca of corporations. At the same time, the city of Greenville, which was unsafe to walk in the evenings, said if they're going to have this kind of growth and this kind of foresight, we need to do the same. And they made it an area that was attractive to international visitors so that that county with that automotive could happen. So I think that this county needs to be a part of the planning process in the look, in the feel, in the resources that are available, because that change is going to happen and we can direct it at this point.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in. Number one, I would like to thank you for taking the time. We did request this meeting. I also like to thank, about a couple months ago, real quick, I'd like to thank County Council. There was an issue with the building department. Being a businessman, builder, y'all stepped up to the plate with the help of Mr. Mulder. That problem was fixed. So I know we can fix things together. And we did a great job. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to help us fix what was going on with the building department, basically. And Mr. Mulder stepping in with a group of builders. I applied for a permit in the morning, by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I had a building permit. Big improvement. Thank you. We did request this meeting because we wanted some direction. We were given instruction to look in the corridors. We floundered, in my opinion, we've been floundering, and so we're asking for your direction, is what you want us to do as a planning commission. If we don't want to get in the corridor overlays, tell us to not get in the corridor overlays. But I think it's your job, maybe I'm wrong, but your job to direct us what to do. Growth is coming. Growth is coming.
Are we overstating that? Because I've lived here for 13 years and haven't experienced that growth just yet.
I don't have stats and statistics, but just by the number of cars and the time it takes to drive down 123, yeah, growth is here. I mean, I think everybody would be in agreement that growth, I mean, there are rural areas. They're always gonna be rural. But this area is growing. People are moving into the area. You know, we are advertising this as Destination Oconee for tourism. So it's gonna bring people into the area. You know, if we don't wanna get into certain areas, that's what we're asking your all's direction for. And we appreciate any direction you give Planning Commission to help us do our job better. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm getting some mixed signals here. This end of the table doesn't even want this corridor. That end of the table is focused on highway safety. That's not what this document says. This document says you got to paint it earth tones, you got to use timbers and rocks and stuff like that. That doesn't contribute to safety. If this needs to be a safety proposition, let's just toss this away and get started on doing safety corridors. And why should this particular stretch of road, why should we focus on making it any safer than any other stretch of road? Now, for highway safety, we more need to look at taking traffic off of, like the 123 corridor, have parallel options. That's where we need to look. You're never gonna put more than about 2 more lanes on 123. But you could double up Shallow Road and relieve tremendous amount of traffic. You know, if we're looking at safety, that's the way they want to go. Cut out left turns, except at traffic lights. Have right turn lanes. But telling people how high they can make their fence and what to make it out of doesn't help safety any. It just impedes on people's rights to do with their own property what they want to do with their own property.
Okay, back to the original question.
Thank you.
The vision for the county regarding further growth and development. As Brad said, this county is growing. I see it every day going down 123, going to Clemson. It's, in the mornings, it takes forever to get from my house on Coffee Road to Anderson. I mean, it takes over an hour to get there. And I'm talking just on this side of Anderson, not the town in there. I'm talking about at Sam's Club. Our traffic problem is getting a lot worse because we have all of these people coming to this county. And I don't want my mother, that's 81 years old, on the highway with these idiots driving 70 and 75 miles an hour. She can't see very well at this point, and she slows down to look to see if she's wanting to turn here to go into whatever store, and some idiot hits her from behind and either kills her or knocks her 1,000 feet down the road. And it does make a difference how people, well, I'm not even gonna get into that, but my vision is I don't want Oconee County to look like Easley. I don't want my county to look like Greenville. We're not Greenville, we're not Easley, we're not Anderson, we're Oconee County. And I don't agree with telling people what they can and can't do with their land, but I also don't agree with that person that owns that land doing what he wants to with it and disturbing me. Because when he disturbs me, then that's wrong. I don't do anything on my land that's gonna disturb him. If I wanna put a hog farm on my property, I ask my neighbors, what do y'all think? My neighbors will tell me either no or yes. Just like the guy that built chicken houses behind my home. He came and asked every landowner around him what they thought about it. And we all told him, it's your land, as long as it don't interfere with me doing what I want to, within, on my land, you do what you want to, but don't interfere with what I'm doing. I hate zoning. I have told everybody that from day one. I hate zoning, but we have it in this county. If we're gonna have it here, let's make it work for everybody. Whether you agree with it or not, let's make it work. Word this 60-page, whatever it is, ordinance, to where my 8-year-old granddaughter can pick it up and read it and understand it. But this corridor is very well needed. It is needed to keep people from pulling out in the middle of the road or pulling out from 900 curb cuts that's down through there and killing somebody. And when traffic gets that bad, people will start using 24. Then what we're gonna do about 24? It's a little 2-lane highway. If we don't do something now, 10, 20, 25 years from now, we're gonna go, oh God, we gotta do something quick. This county is well known for being reactive instead of proactive. If we don't do something here to curb some of this traffic, and it is a safety issue. And businesses, I've talked to several businesses in this county in the last 2 weeks and asked them, if we do a corridor or we do this, and you're not even here, but you're thinking about coming into Oconee County, what is your opinion of that? They said, it doesn't matter. If we want in this county, we're coming. Whether you have a corridor or not, we will make arrangements to do whatever has to be done to come into this county. So it's not a business issue, but if we don't control it, it will become a very bad issue and people will die just because we were stupid and sat on our thumbs and twiddled our fingers around going, oh, let's just keep it like it is. It's the dumbest thing in the world. And I've been in this county for almost 60 years. I've seen the worst of it, because we ain't in the worst of it. I've seen it. I've seen the best of it. And we can't go back to the 60s and 70s. But we can plan for the future to make sure that it don't go back to being one of the worst counties in the state. Thank you.
Anybody else want to chime in on this quickly, because we're running out of time, and in all honesty, I don't feel like we're answering the question.
Okay, I'll be real fast. I left Seneca in 2000, came back here in 2009, and was surprised at how few people I graduated with were still here. And so when I came back here, I've got almost 4 kids now. 4th one's coming in January. And for me, all of this and me having my time here is about building a county where they can stay here if they want. And I think that's what that's what's important about this is let's look at this, let's work it out, and let's make sure future generations can stay here, can enjoy it, and can be a part of it.
Okay, we're going to move on in the interest of time, but like I said just a second ago, I still don't feel we're answering this question, at least not to my satisfaction, but we'll have to think about this some more. Okay, the next topic, corridors, everyone's favorite topic. Okay, we have a couple of sub-items we wanted to look into here. First one is focus on immediate needs versus focus on multiple corridors. Given the sentiment, I guess we should focus on immediate needs. That being the case, what are those immediate needs?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Some of the immediate needs we have to have, this goes back, the planning commission, so many times we go into, get back to executive session and whatever, and Richie comes to us with a development, or we, later on, we find out that, developer having problems with roads, and then the Chief King comes to us, well, we can't cover fire, we lack fire mains and stuff. Part of what would help the council, if the planning commission was to concentrate on, okay, something is coming down the line, whatever it is, development, whatever. And the planning commission then gets with Richard or whoever and says, okay, are the water lines big enough? Can we provide fire protection for this group or whatever's coming in here? Are the roads big enough? Do the roads have enough base that we gonna put this out here in the middle of nowhere and the road crumbles and falls apart? It falls back on the taxpayers. Do we have enough power for this whatever this is coming in? Ingress and egress, we have a problem now that the council and is a development going in, and there's only one way in and out. And all this needs to be, I feel, would be helpful if the planning commission could look at it for the immediate needs. Another immediate need we have is, can we handle the amount of waste, garbage, and sewage? How are we gonna do that? Does the development, and then you ask yourself, does the developer make the money, and then the expense of the development fall back to the taxpayers? And that would help a lot if the planning commission would say, okay, yes, we have enough power, they're not gonna have to have a thing, yes or no, no, they don't have enough sewer there, they can't possibly build that, so why even get started into it? And the planning commission could be very helpful in giving direction to the council on what's coming down the line. Because so many times we've sat up here and, well, this project so-and-so is gonna happen. And then they say, well, the person doing project so-and-so, they're asking for the taxpayers, they're asking for the council, but it's really the taxpayer. We gotta pay for upgrades in sewer, we gotta pay for upgrades in roads and all this other stuff. If it had gone before the planning commission says, okay, we reviewed this, and yes, we can do this, or no, we can't do that, that would be most helpful. And the planning commission, its job, the way we see it, is planning. And that would help us out a lot. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Ms. McCall, I appreciate you saying that, because in fact, I believe that what you're describing is in fact the duty and responsibility of the planning commission. That's why they call us planning. Unfortunately, we have not been provided with the tools or the authority to do any of that stuff. Schools are established, their locations are established most of the time before we ever even know for sure they're going to be built. The land is purchased without us ever being told where the school is going to be until the land is purchased. And the same is pretty much true for industry. They do not, we did recently request from Mr. Chapman that he bring us staff updates on projects that were coming into the county, that were asking to come into the county, just so that we would know. Because most of the time, we're like most of the rest of the citizens in the county, we're sitting back wondering what project, whatever the top secret code name is because we don't know. And so we can't have any say over whether or not they come if we don't know they're coming. But I agree, we would love to plan, because that is what we feel like would be a great contribution to this community.
And we need to see what we can do to help you and your commission.
His commission right now.
Madam Chair. So, Mr. McCall, are you suggesting that, a lot of economic development, 90% of it's based on timing? It seems like a deal happens or falls apart in 60 to 90 days. It's like it gets on the table. So you're suggesting that after somebody comes to us to move their business here, then we plan, and then we develop, and then we run the power, and then the ingress, egress after the development comes, because like, to me, that's why we've lost so much. We've had the land, whether you agree or disagree with the land purchase, that's for, you know, whatever, we have the land now. But if we don't develop the land, then it's a hayfield. You know, if we wait on somebody to come and then plan, we don't have time to do that. It's already, the deal is either already lost or the developer plans for us. And that's what's happened multiple times. That's what, you know, when you said plan after development comes, is that like after an industry decides they're gonna come, or is that?
No, we need to, these people on the planning commission, their job is planning, not zoning, not anything else. And they would ask themselves, do we have adequate power? Or do we go ahead and bob our heads up and down and say, oh yeah, come on in here, and then we up here at council says, oh, by the way, we gotta raise, spend a bunch of money because these people are coming in, and the developer's gonna make the money, but the taxpayers, the rest of us, are gonna have to maybe pay for power line, pay for right-of-ways, pay for sewer lines. How many times have we voted to have to spend more money on sewer? Because the planning commission, you can't blame them. They didn't know it was coming. Ms. McPhail is absolutely right. We need to work together, because it's like Mr. K said, well, if we fail to plan, then we gonna fail. Well, we can't just run in there and say, oh, by the way, so-and-so built this big residential subdivision, and by the way, Mr. King comes to us, the fire chief, and says, oh, by the way, we'll have to build a big, huge substation or fire department, we gotta buy these expensive fire trucks. When all the time, the planning commission could have gone to the developer and says, okay, you ain't got no fire protection, we lacking fire protection. Either you will have to come up with it, or whatever they decide, and quit throwing it back on the taxpayers. The same as the industry always looks, you can say they've already studied whether or not the power's there, the water's there, or whatever. They're not, but it needs to, the planning commission would do a great job if they had direction and given the tools by council to plan.
So the planning commission that we appoint decides what we as the council should do?
We have the vote, they're supposed to advise us.
Madam Chairman? I agree with Mr. McCall that planning is what we're titled and what our objective is to do. I also agree with Ms. McPhail that we oftentimes aren't given the information that we need to find out what's going on. However, I also think that some of the examples that are given really would be calling us the reactionary commission rather than the planning commission. And I would ask that council really try and make sure that if our job is to plan, that you give us direction on helping plan and not helping react.
Madam Chair, if I could just read from the law that talks about functions, powers, and duties of local planning commissions, 6-29-340. It is the function and duty of the local planning commission when created by an ordinance passed by the municipal council or the county council or both to undertake a continuing planning program for the physical, social, and economic growth, development, and redevelopment of the area within its jurisdiction. The plans and programs must be designed to promote public health, safety, morals, convenience, prosperity, or the general welfare, as well as the efficiency and economy of its area of jurisdiction. Specific planning elements must be based upon careful and comprehensive surveys and studies of existing conditions and probable future development, and include recommended means of implementation. And it goes through there for another several paragraphs talking about that. But if you go down to the next one, the duties and powers of the Planning Commission are numerous, and they include preparing and revising plans for development and redevelopment, to prepare and recommend for adoption the appropriate governing authority as a means for implementing the plans, zoning ordinances to include zoning district maps, regulations for the subdivision, an official map and appropriate revisions showing the exact location of existing or proposed public street, highway, and utility rights-of-way, public building sites, other rights-of-way, landscaping ordinances, setting forth required planning, tree preservation, other aesthetic considerations, a capital improvements program, including an annual listing of priority projects for consideration, and policies or procedures to facilitate implementation of planning elements. I think it's, and I paraphrase that, I just kind of picked out the key words in there, but it's important for us to stay focused on the fact that it is planning, and to Mr. Johnson's point, we can't always disclose what, and economic development often doesn't disclose to us what project it is and the exact needs of that. But that's where planning serves a role in that if we want to encourage industrial development, we know that most industrial development requires a lot of power and a lot of sewer and maybe some natural gas and, you know, a lot of water, whatever else they might need. So if we want to encourage those types of development, we have to make sure that where we want it to occur has the right utilities and the right land and the ability to use it, and we're not impacting a bunch of closed neighborhoods and all that. And I think that that's the reason that the Planning Commission exists, one of the reasons that it exists, and one of the reasons that our fathers down in Columbia thought it wise to enact this law, is so that we can plan and aren't just doing this on the fly, because none of us have time to be on county council for 50 hours a week. We need the help of all of you, and nor do I want to be the only person that I consult with. I want a group of people to help, you know, sharpen, as iron sharpens iron. You know, people talking, people debating, and discussing is not a bad thing. That's what makes this country great, is we can talk and we can debate things. But that doesn't mean that we have to be, you know, mean to each other or rude. It's just a matter of talking about it, talking through these things. All that to say, I welcome any ideas on any of these proposed ordinances. I didn't write this stuff. I think some of it's overboard. I think some of it's great. But I don't think we should look at it and say, well, I disagree with these parts, so we need to do away with the whole thing. Let's talk about these things, and that's our job, is to discuss it and work through it. And I think this is great. I think we should do these more often, maybe quarterly, to have the Council and Planning Commission get together. But there is the Planning Commission serves a very important purpose in county government, and I appreciate what y'all do. And we couldn't do our jobs. We can't do our jobs if y'all aren't doing your jobs.
And I'm going to go back to your first question just for a second. What is our vision for the county? To describe, I'm sorry, but for half a second I want to describe some meetings that we sat in long years ago when we first started the fair. And that was a group of people in the southern part of the county, some of whom were landowners who wanted to get, you know, who wanted to do what they wanted to do with their land, and that was to sell it for the highest prices for the greatest potential development right there on 95, which of course would be a natural thing to do. And then there were some of us old farmers who wanted to, you know, slow traffic and nobody on the road. And then there were a group of people who lived there but who worked in town, and people who lived on the lake. And we often talked about, all of us would love to see, for me it was a Starbucks down there at Fairplay. That would be great. If we could develop something in such a way that we could have a nice, you know, a fresh market there at Fairplay. If we could have that development there, and yet somehow preserve from Fairplay into Seneca as still the beautiful drive that it is, meandering drive through the rural community. And then you get to Seneca and it has these beautiful developments and these wonderful, you know, water parks or things for kids to do. I think that that would be a universal vision. It seemed like it was down there where we had such a diverse group that was meeting and talking about. Some of the folks who wanted to sell their land, certainly there should be nice restaurants. There should be perhaps some industry that is fed via 85 either to Atlanta or to Greenville. But then understand that that precious road from Fairplay into Seneca is in fact the route off of 85 into Seneca. So it also is a scenic view that needs to be preserved so that people still want to come to Seneca. And Highway 11 still needs to be preserved so that they can get up to the beautiful scenic parts there. So I think while we could love to say we don't want any change, we have to know that we will have change. But we can hope that perhaps if there's a commerce park down there that will bring that, let's plan to build that commerce park. And that's where the planning commission comes in and says, yes, let's plan sewer to that place. Whatever it takes budgetary wise, let's plan that. But then let's also plan to protect the families that are between that and Seneca who want to maintain their rural lifestyle and their scenic views. And that's where, to me, if the planning can do that part of the job, and remember to think of all the things that come along, I think the county can go a long ways in getting a little bit of what everybody wants, maybe.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the original, kind of the original question. We keep hearing economic development announcements. So as a council, that sends me a signal that you want to grow this county. We're encouraging, we're advertising for business, we're trying to get businesses here. With business comes people, with business comes houses, with business comes traffic. So again, we need the direction. If we are growing the county, which it sounds like we are growing the county, we are encouraging development, businesses. So either we encourage them or we don't encourage them. But it sounds like we're encouraging them because I read them all the time in the paper. That's great. So we need to plan on how to handle the additional people, the additional traffic, the additional fire, water, sewer, all that good stuff. And that's where we need direction. And I agree, we need to do this more often. I think we should be working together. It shouldn't be a contentious relationship. It should be, we're not doing it for the money. We're doing it for the love of this county. So.
Now, I've seen your checks, Mr. Kissel.
But, I think, the answer, further growth is either, shut down the economic development office or we've got to implement. I mean, I'm private property rights. I got into this when I bought a piece of property and the rules were trying to be changed after the fact. And here I am 3 years later sitting on planning commission. I don't want that to happen to anybody. I don't want the rules to change after they buy a piece of property. But in the same sense, driving through Clemson, I love Clemson, but getting from the bridge to College Avenue takes 20 minutes. And that's what's gonna happen if we don't plan. Thank you.
I'm getting a mixed signal here myself. You don't want the traffic, you don't want the curb cuts, but the curb cuts, to me, that means more business and more growth. And that's what, when you're complaining about the curb cuts, that's sort of wiping out what Mr. Blackwell's doing. Because I don't know how many of these people here that would like to have their curb cut filled up with concrete to keep people out. Ask Mr. Davis there, I think he's got a curb cut. So what I'm saying is we're pulling two different directions. If you don't want any curb cuts.
I'm not sure that that's what council is saying, and and Mr. Davis there's 4 businesses accessing that one cut rather
More
than.
that.
I'm sorry?
There's probably
10 businesses for one curb cut rather than 10 curb cuts. So I think as planning, we're not discussing, we don't want business to come into a spot. We're saying intelligent growth. If you can design something where you have one curb cut for 10 businesses, how much better is that and how much safer is that? I don't think that can be argued.
intelligent growth, safety, deceleration, safety, acceleration. I think it's 85% of accidents are rear end. You go down 123, look at the black marks down through there. There's the ones that aren't, there's a deceleration lane. Yeah, it may only be 2 cars, but it allows about 15 to 20 mile an hour deceleration before you turn. We call it the third car back. It's always the third car back that takes the hit. That is, when I sit here and talk about corridor planning, that's my safety. And that does have to do with setbacks and signage and stuff like that, because when you actually do something like this, you actually encourage more business in your area. It's safer in and out. Usually the medians is a little bit safer because you have a double median. And it is when it's room. I do agree with that. I mean, if you buy a tract of land and it's, only wide enough, and the thing that gets me is the curb cuts. If you have 28 curb cuts down through College Avenue or going to Clemson, I guess you can call it whatever you want, 93 or 123. I'm so confused with roads right now. But it's just constant in and out, in and out, in and out. And if you think about it, yes, if you have a rear drive, let's say that the whole downtown Clemson had a rear drive. I know we're not Clemson, but I'm just thinking out loud, because some people say, oh, you can't do that up front. If you do that up front, you're going to cost me to have my business. Well, a lot of places are going to a rear drive area. If you want to go in there and get whatever it is, whether it's a Chick-fil-A or whatever else, you understand that you're going to get into traffic in that scenario. But a pass-through person or a person trying to drive safely, I don't remember it being that way as a child, or 15. I'll call it a child now because I'm 37. Driving through there and having to stop as many times now when I drive. And if you talk to any auto body shop in Oconee or wherever, one of their #1 jobs is brakes. And that is because of the situations that we're in with curb cut after curb, boom, 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 boom. Where one, with connecting parking, is actually better, is safer, and it actually promotes more business in the build than having 16 different curb cuts. That's where I come from on that, especially with the deceleration. Acceleration, okay, leave that to the drive, but the deceleration lanes, they save more lives than you could just imagine. And it's a big deal anywhere you drive, on especially your 55 and above lanes.
Can I ask that we hear from the SCDOT gentleman? He's here to let us know how the state determines where a curb cut is, who gets them, how many they get, and such as that. Would it be a good time, since we're talking about this, would it be a good time for him to maybe speak to us?
My name is Brandon Wilson. I'm the district permits engineer for SCDOT in District 3. Work over in the Greenville office, so I'm familiar with what you guys are experiencing. I've given you a few handouts. I'll try to go through those. The first one is a page out of our SCDOT Orange Manual. The Access and Roadside Management Standards. The most important part of this page is the chart on the back. This shows you our driveway spacing that we permit from one drive to the next for all commercial activities. So US 123, as you guys have talked about this evening, it varies everywhere from 35 to above 50. So most of this chart applies to that roadway. The way we implement this chart kind of is shown up here at the top in the diagram. We measure the driveways inside to inside, and all driveways must meet that spacing in current developments on our roadways. I have questions on that portion of it.
So you're saying that in order to get a curb cut on 123 in a 45-mile-an-hour posted zone, on a road that has greater than or less than, it's either 325 or 225 feet between driveways?
It's 325.
Okay,
Because
or
one-
225 for roadways less than 2,000 average daily trip?
Yes. Other.
All right, so my question is, how did the doctor's office on 123 next to Wendy's get a curb cut when their driveway is less than that distance from Wendy's?
So the other portion of the state law requires us to provide access to all parcels.
And I think that is the discussion that this group needs to be having. DOT does have restrictions, but they're not always applied. And if we want to prevent that 40-foot from curb cut to curb cut from happening from Wendy's to the doctor's office, that's where we need to have that discussion. And is that the discussion you want to have?
The rest of this kind of goes to exactly that. So if someone has a large frontage, this applies. If someone has small frontage, then we get into the waivers between accesses. The sheet I gave you that says plan development requesting many accesses. So currently, most of you know there's a food line at that location. There are 2 accesses for that facility. Our understanding when they came to us for the original permit was all access would be internal from that point. Recently, I've had requests for additional accesses off of US 123. So, at this point, we have not come up with a solution to that, just due to the roadway geometry. But this is one where, because of additional subdivision of property, we are now, by law, looking to try to find a way to provide a safe access to an additional piece of property that before was supposed to be internally connected. The next item, the plan development that is on 123. Here, 2 driveway accesses were permitted to 123. A frontage road was built, essentially a frontage road, and all the businesses are coming off of those 2 accesses. When we have a large parcel, this is how we will attempt to manage the accesses.
So the state of South Carolina, under law, determines, your department determines accesses and how the accesses will be implemented.
We follow the guidelines that we're given to provide safe access to the roadways.
How long have those laws been in place?
The current standards or laws?
Just any law that governs the safety of encroachment onto the road. How long have they been?
The current standards were written in 2008. They're constantly updated. And those are what the access and roadside management standards are what we go off of now.
So the council, I agree with you, the council, we don't dictate to the highway department. The highway department tells us what their standards are under the law.
Okay.
Okay, you would, the state regulates anything, curb cuts on state roads.
Yes, sir.
County roads, county council can dictate.
Actually, through land development regulations, the county has the authority to dictate them as well, through development of property. It's not just limited by law to the state. If we choose to let them do it, that's one thing, but it's not just limited by law. We have the option.
And Mr. Molnar had pointed out an example of a variance to that rule. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yeah. Yeah, we've.
They're
been
gonna get a
providing-
curb cut to their property.
So-
We'll give it to them one way or the other.
So that's where planning comes in, is trying to help direct that. Same with where the food line is right now, and you all are trying to go through the exercise of, at a state level, trying to figure out where that cut's gonna come into play. Rather than planning saying, this is how we would like developers to do it in the first place, as this developer had proposed to do it, which is to have a drive that connects all the properties from that one curb cut.
Right, and the issue I face now is that, yes, it was permitted as all internal accesses, but now I have a new owner of that piece of property who was never a party to that original permit. All he has is a parcel, and he's trying to get access to the roadway. Now, the law doesn't say I have to give him the access that he wants. I'm gonna give him the safest access I can. So it's more than likely gonna be a right-in, right-out driveway in the safest location we can find.
So, it sounds like we're getting some myths debunked here today. Y'all respect local ordinance with regard to curb cuts, but you do certainly grant variances where there are no local ordinances, correct?
I've never looked at a local ordinance.
Well, we don't have any right now, so.
But I'm not, I mean, I do Spartanburg, Greenville, Pickens, and Oconee, and I've never looked at a local ordinance on a state road.
You look though at the developer asking for a particular location,
Yes,
who has to follow the local ordinance.
yeah, I assume so, yes.
Thanks, Mike.
So if we decided, let's say, our curb cuts or deceleration, acceleration had to be X, Y, Z, we can, and developer comes in, we can decide to remove, how would that work, Scott, Mr. Mulder? If we decide, okay, we'll allow that cut for this purpose, as long as there's the deceleration means to
No,
it?
we're not gonna issue encroachment permits, we don't have the authority to issue encroachment permit applications. That obviously rests with the state. But what you could do, if chosen, is if you take a look at a particular area, let's call it a corridor, might as well just use the word, it's out there. And you have a 40-acre tract in a high-speed area with multiple curb cuts. Do you want to require, if they're gonna develop that into multiple parcels, provide one access or multiple accesses, right? Or if you have a 100-acre tract or a 2-acre tract, what you're requiring them is, do you wanna require shared drives between developments? If you've got an area with two 40-acre tracts and both of them you think are gonna develop in the future, do you require one shared drive between them that they can develop with? And then they apply for that one shared drive using our local ordinance with them, with DOT, and then you do it that way. So through your development regs, you can dictate connections to be installed between properties internally. So if you have 123 and you've got Old Clemson Highway and you've got a 40-acre tract and a 20-acre tract, you can set your development regs to require that when the development on 123 occurs, they have to provide an out on the backside of the property that will ultimately connect with Old Clemson Highway. So that somebody can leave that development and go to Old Clemson Highway without getting out on 123, coming down to the traffic light, sitting in the left-hand turn lane, and going back. And then you require the developer on Old Clemson Highway to connect to that and provide connectivity. So it can be done many different ways, and you do that through land development regs. I mean, you're not telling somebody they can't put a gas station somewhere. You're just telling them if they do, they have to help mitigate traffic that gas station's gonna cause by following these particular rules. You've gotta share with the neighbor. That keeps you having multiple access points between two lots. You only have one, which reduces that by half. And then if you provide connection requirements to other large tracts or developments, then they can get out without even getting on 123. Just options for you guys to discuss. Everything that you guys have said here, even to Mr. Grambling, you realize that everything you've talked about is planning. Infrastructure planning is quality of life planning. Identifying the areas where you need infrastructure growth because you think development's coming there, and you plan for that development, and you plan for the infrastructure upgrades in that area, that's planning. If you want to upgrade infrastructure all over the place, that's a waste of resources. You maximize your resources by identifying where that infrastructure needs to be upgraded. Mr. Gramling, your highway, Crunch Shallow idea, beautiful. But Anderson County has Anderson has a bypass that used to probably be just like Crunch Shallow. Now look at it. Curb cut after curb cut after curb cut and growth. If you don't put the proper growth mechanism and smart growth mechanisms on Crunch Shallow, guess what? Eventually it's going to be a 4-lane and it's going to be just like 123. If you want to maintain your rural characteristics of your community, everybody says we don't want it to change. So we shouldn't do planning. Well, guess what? Planning can help maintain the way your community is. You guys have all talked around a circle and you're talking in agreement, you don't even know it.
Okay, if they hadn't built the 28 bypass at Anderson, what would the traffic through downtown be now?
Absolutely. And guess what? They
Okay.
had to actually go out in front of Tri-County Tech and their airport and widen that one. And eventually that's going to grow. If they'd have put proper mechanisms in place on the bypass on 28 for smart growth down through there, guess what? More people would be using it instead of finding other ways around that one.
What I'm getting at
It's the
about
same
Shallow
problem.
Road, and that's just one possibility, but that
You know
is
what?
another avenue for
I bet you
traffic.
Clemson University, City of Clemson told me they wish they'd have planned to have a frontage road or a bypass road around 123. And guess what? They're actually trying to find a way to put one in now because traffic congestion is so bad. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm telling you, you're absolutely right. If we sat down and said, look, guys, in 30 years, 123 is going to look different. We better start planning now for an alternative. What about Shallow Road? But let's make sure we do Shallow Road correctly so it doesn't become like a 123 in 15 to 20 years. So that way our kids. So you guys are all, I mean, you're talking the same thing. You just don't know it.
Can I ask a question? We're talking about the sheriff, if we have the ordinance or whatever you wanna call it.
One more thing, and if we'd have done impact fees 20 years ago when all that growth and development, sorry builders, sorry developers, but if we'd have done, I'm sorry, Mr. Martin, if we'd have done impact fees, guess what? That money's supposed to be used for fire stations and schools and road upgrades and utility upgrades that are necessary to fix the problem that growth and development causes, right? So if you want to prevent problems down the road for infrastructure, start charging impact fees right now, and that's what'll pay for those $1.2 million worth of substations and fire departments that we just put in. So,
Scott,
yes, sir.
does the planning commission have, is there such a map in existence that they have that shows water potential, water lines?
No, sir, they
Sewer
don't.
potential, sewer lines, power potential, KVA potential, and also the roads. If they had this tool in their pockets to say, when somebody comes to them and say, okay, guy, you want to build a subdivision? Hey, you ain't got enough sewer line, the road, look at the road, you're gonna make a mess down here. They could alleviate a lot of heartburn and us going into executive session and saying, well, we gotta find the money to do this, we gotta find the money to, Charlie King says the fire station only gonna cost another $1.2 million. I'm not throwing off on Charlie, but I'm just throwing out a number. Planning could have done all this.
I don't disagree with you, but guess what? You just now told that developer he can't do with his property what he wants to do because we didn't properly plan and have our impact fees in place that charges to developers to assist with upgrading those road and infrastructure when the time came. We didn't properly plan and say, hey, this is gonna be a growth area around the lake. We need to make sure that we upgrade the infrastructure around that lake for whenever it does come and then charge it back to the developers who's causing us the problem.
Yeah,
Right.
but at the same time, if before he bought the land, he said, well, you know, I got an idea, maybe I ought to see on this map here that the planning commission has, what is the infrastructure, what's here? They only got a 2-inch water line, I wonder sometimes if they know. They only got a 2-inch water line out and we're gonna put 300 units
You
in?
and I are saying the same thing, Mr. McCall, we just don't even know it.
Yeah, but I'm just, I'm saying give these guys the authority, or at least try to help them, rather than saying, I get calls all the time, they the planning commission, they're the zoning commission. I said, no, they're the planning commission, but we gotta help these guys.
You know, you can do planning without zoning. It's called land development regulations. It's not telling people use, it's telling them how. If you would think a gas station on your property is gonna go all the way up in the mountains somewhere, fine. But if you put it there, here are a few things you have to do to mitigate the impact that it has on the surrounding area and on the traffic or whatever it may be. So, I mean, there's plenty of options. I'll be quiet, you guys have your meeting, but you're all talking around the same thing. I just figured I'd let you know.
And I would agree, we are all talking about the same thing, and I would absolutely agree with Mr. McCall that a developer would love to be able to see what the water line looks like, what the electricity resource is, what the building requirements are, what the setback requirements are, what the curb cut requirement is, and all of these things that planning and putting in a document for a developer to see, which is what we're asking to be able to do.
Okay, got a question. Going back to the curb cuts, if we have an ordinance that says that we require you, this parcel, these two parcels to utilize the same curb cut, will the state go for that, or will they say, well, what if this guy don't want to, and the state's, you're gonna give him a curb cut, give the one right beside him a curb cut? Or will you follow our ordinance and say, well, the county says you give one to share, that's what you get. Now, where you want it is determined by both of you, but you get one to share between you.
So my assumption in this area would be that you're controlling the building permit, the grading permit. We require local government approval on every permit we sign off on. So somebody has come to Oconee and gotten approval before I put my name on it and give them the curb cut. You're telling them they get one driveway. They're gonna come to me with one driveway.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Now, if they come to me with two driveways and somebody from Oconee signs off on it, I'm gonna permit two driveways.
Right, that's what I wanted to know. All right.
You should.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Moeller's gone 30 years into the future. They're gonna do something in New York City in the next few months that might have an impact on everything we've been talking about. They're gonna have driverless cars in New York City. So these safety issues and these curb cuts they're worried about may be a thing of the past.
If that turns out to be the case, then I'm sure I'll have a different manager. I'll do it then.
But until that point, Mr. Hart, shouldn't we plan until we know that we're going to have driverless cars everywhere?
Well, they testing that in New York City, according to what I read on the internet.
They're testing a mission to Mars. That doesn't mean that we should all just plan to move to Mars.
Well, you're talking about planning. I got something for you. The microwaves, saccharin, Slinky, Play-Doh, super glue, Teflon, Bake Right, Pacemakers, Goodyear, dental floss, penicillin, potato chips, x-rays, safety glasses, inkjet printers, artificial sweeteners, and the little postage you put on your thing. You know what they have in common? They was all accidentally invented. No planning. So was a lot of kids in the world.
So,
Okay.
Right turn lane on, 123.
Madam Chair,
How's that work?
I could just at one point jump in. A lot of what y'all are talking about is covered in the comprehensive plan when you're talking about the machinery that's in place for the planning commission to do what it needs to do to make the place ready for development, to make it community friendly. These are things that are covered in the comprehensive plan that hasn't been, that needs its review to be finalized. It needs to be updated, that hasn't been done since 2010. So I believe Mr. McCall perhaps is the only one who was really active at that time here. And that's a process. And a lot of this will be ironed out as that process has gone through. So I don't want to, I'm not trying to circuit any of the discussion, but that is the mechanism when you're talking about planning, that this is a community involved
document that covers population, natural resources, housing, economic development, land use, all of these things, and what the vision of the county is on all those. And that's something that I think Planning Commission has on its radar that really brings a laser focus to these. So I just don't want us to lose focus to the fact that that's gonna address a lot of this stuff.
And when is this taking place?
I think on the next.
We got about halfway through it and before we got sidelined on all these other things.
Okay. Well, let's get back to the corridors, because we want to move on a little bit. Can we agree that the focus should be 123 for this point in time?
What part?
What part?
We were discussing 3 different sections. If you wanna do 123, because from Seneca to Clemson, I mean, yeah, most of the property is already taken care of. No matter what we do, everybody down, I mean, there's just a few vacant properties down through there that would be impacted by any type of regulation, corridor, whatever you.
Well, but what I've been hearing over and over again is 123, 123, we can't drive through 123.
Well,
Well, what
And now
he's
you're
saying
telling
is
me
that
that we don't need to bother with 123 because it's
No,
taken
no.
care
is
of.
we need to, what we have been trying to do as a planning commission is come up with a generic, I hate to say the generic, but a basic corridor plan.
Ingalls to Clemson is what you're trying to identify.
And just-
Something like that.
And just, that way we can take it and say, okay, council wants us to look at 59, they want us to look, and we can take that same generic, I guess you'd call it, corridor plan, and make a few minor changes to it, and apply it to 28, apply it to 59, even apply it to 11. We have to consider the scenic highway restrictions as well, but, and apply it to any area that the council deems necessary to have those type of restrictions. Our biggest problem is we're getting so many mixed signals. We want a corridor. No, we don't want a corridor. We want zoning. No, we don't want zoning. So we need definite stuff to say, okay, we want a corridor plan for this. We work on it, we get it, and then we want council to say, okay, we want you to work on a plan for this highway. We're getting so many mixed signals. We don't know what highway we want to do because nobody's actually gave us a concrete pinpoint location of exactly what you want and what kind of restrictions you want on that. I mean, we can make it as restrictive as possible, but that's not what we want. We just want to do what's right and get this thing done because we're working on stuff for 3 and 4 and 5 months, and then it gets voted down. We've got a comprehensive plan we need to do. We've got a land use map we need to upgrade, and we need to get on that. But we want to finish this job, and we can't do it without the direction from council to let us know exactly what y'all want. Then we can get it worded and get back to y'all where y'all can vote on it.
Before council says something, I'd like to add to what Mr. Pearson has said, if that's okay. Going all the way down, we have a comprehensive plan which was developed by the community, which the community wanted us to have a corridor plan. Not any of us sitting here, but the community at large wanted that.
Well, you know, we have this Vision 2008-2028, and I recall when this came to be because I moved here in 2004. But in all honesty, when I look at it today and I look at the steering committee, I don't even recognize the names here except for 1 or 2. So I'm not sure this is representative of the current community or the current sentiments. So I looked at some of the points here and, you know, they touch on a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But again, you know, I think if it were to be redone today, this might have a completely different look to it. I'm not sure, I don't know.
Well, it would definitely have different names on it, but I don't know that
Well,
it's
maybe it'll be names
representative of
that I
the community.
recognize, but, you know,
But
when
if-
I look at the names on here, I'm going, who are these people? Well, I know Phil Shirley, okay?
If I may, let me finish real quick, if I may, please. As planning commission, we have said, okay, there are multiple corridors which we have the ability to plan for the future. There's very little left to plan between Clemson and Ingalls, although there are still a few spots. At this point, we may be potentially overreaching with the owners of those pieces of land.
Okay, then why am I hearing so much about traffic on 123? You're stuck
One
with the
twenty-three
traffic
goes
you're
all the
gonna-
way to Georgia.
This-
So it's not just Clemson to the city line.
This
123
corridor
goes all the
document
way.
doesn't address traffic. This
But
corridor.
that's what we've been hearing here today. I've been hearing traffic on 123. It takes an hour
Okay.
to get to Anderson. It's taken me an hour to get to Anderson. That's where I work ever since I moved here in 2004. That has not changed. So I don't think you're going to get an answer tonight as to what exactly we want you to do. So having said that, let's move on. Control-free district, is it a zoning district? Should it be added to the matrix?
Can I ask if there's any other questions?
I have a question for this gentleman so he can sit down.
But we do thank you, because your input was valuable.
I've got a question. If we decide we want to put some right turn lanes on 123, maybe a U-turn lane at the stoplights, what's the procedure for that? Does the state do it? Do we do it?
There are probably 4 or 5 different ways that could be done. All the way from enforcing a developer as part of a mitigation for a major development, all the way through to planning it through the local COG or planning group to do that through the department.
We've already submitted that plan to the infrastructure, federal transportation funds that come through the COG. We've already submitted a 123 mitigation plan, and cost estimates is one of our priorities, and that, I think it's about 10 projects throughout the county for transportation monies. So those have been submitted in our list for 123. It won't be popular, but we at least included that as one of our priorities.
As part of a mitigation recently on a permit, we're having an entire realignment of 93 and 123, as you probably are aware. So that was a requirement that we had to the developer for the development that was going on there at the lake.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right. Question, control-free district, is it a zoning district, and should it be added to the matrix if it is?
No.
No. Next.
I think that it should be added to the matrix.
Next.
Yes.
No, yes, yes.
If it is a zoning district, can I go back to it if I get out of it? If we put it in the matrix, can I go back and forth?
No.
Then it's not a zoning district. It's an initial zoning.
When?
Yes.
Yes.
It
I
says
don't know your
control-free
name.
district.
Alex Bassett, with my extensive experience on the planning commission. I'm gonna say yes.
David Root.
It is a zoning district, it's called a zoning district, it's an oddity because it was initially put in as kind of a placeholder for folks to go into a more controlled, true zoning district, but the bigger question, the bigger issue again goes back to the comprehensive plan. All zoning has to essentially track from this. Hey, this is a dynamic document, so it understands that things are gonna move, but control-free district is talked about in the comprehensive plan, consistent with the way everyone has thought about it. Since I've been here, and certainly what I've heard for a decade prior to that, is that it's control-free. So I think making a movement to put it on the use matrix, doing more than, I mean, they put setbacks on it, but doing more than that, and even put it on the use matrix and just putting permitted for every kind of use, I still think the comprehensive plan has to come first, and a new discussion about control-free has to be written into the comprehensive plan for us not to have any kickback potentially on it.
Mr. Root? On this agriculture thing that they pushed last year, I understand that they was telling everybody, if you like it, you're good. If you don't like it, you can come out of it. When you come out of it, you don't go back to control-free district, do you?
That's correct. this point, you cannot.
That's what I
rezone
wanted to know.
control-free. Which is the next, well, yes, next issue is just small area zoning.
That was part of that small area rezoning request, we were allowed them to go back more.
Why can't we allow them to go back?
Oh, no, I'm not saying you can't, that's the way it's written now. It's the initial zoning district, once you zone out of it, the way our ordinance is written, you can't zone back to control-free. If you zone somewhere else, then you can do it parcel by parcel, and that's that next discussion item that you have. You can't zone out of control-free parcel by parcel now, and you can't zone back into it, period, the way our law is written at this point.
But we work for the people, and the people are the boss. If they wanna go back, they're not happy, they're the ones that put all us up here. If they're not happy, we are obligated to try to meet their needs, as long as it's not unreasonable. If they, well, I don't wanna do this, I wanna go back to the other thing, we owe them at least the consideration.
And I think that goes back to the discussion of why control-free and what it means to everybody. And once you all approve a zoning request to put somebody in some particular area, you have to do it with the mind of, does it fit with the land use map, the future land use map? And so you say, yes, it does, and then things spring up around it, and then someone says, well, I want to go back to control-free, even though I'm in whatever it may be, residential district, and put a manufacturing facility in there, then you cause issues. And so I think that's why the discussion, probably that's why that rezoning back to control-free was put in there, and that's why that discussion has to happen in light of the comprehensive plan. I don't disagree with what you're saying, I'm just pointing out the legal, what we have in place, what needs to be put in place to make the changes.
In other words, we've told those people a lie when we said that if you want to go agriculture, if you go into this, you can go back. If you don't like it, all you got to do is wipe it out and you're going back.
I don't remember that discussion. Yeah, sure.
Mr. Hart, I was the one that did a lot of speaking to families who came and asked me to talk to them on the ag thing. At no point did I ever tell anybody, and not anybody that I know of told anybody, that they could go back to control-free. What we did tell them was that at points in the future, as development occurred, they needed to move their zoning, if they wanted to zone from agriculture to something else that allowed them to do something that went more along with how things were developing in the future, then they would be able to change to another district, which they can do. They can go from ag to residential or commercial or.
They can't go back to where they started.
But no, sir, we never told them they could go back to where to control-free.
Mr. Boulder, didn't we, with anybody that was in this classification that we're speaking of here, didn't they receive material well before it ever occurred?
Yes, sir, we actually delayed the process and went back and made sure we communicated in multiple facets with each person that was included in that particular zoning classification and gave them the option of dropping out. And the planning commission even held additional hearings and allowed anybody to come and speak and remove themselves from it. And was communicated to.
And I know I attended at least one of those sessions, and I know the do not go back to control-free was, and it was out there. It was understood. 'Cause I know we had at least probably, I don't know, 5 or 10 that night that said, I want out. No problem. And that's the reason why we did that. Because that was about a 2-3 month process, if I remember correctly. It may have been longer than that, right?
So if we add this into the matrix, would that not confuse people even more, thinking it's in the matrix, I can switch back and forth with everything else, so I should be able to switch back to control-free?
I think it does.
I just think it was an initial zoning. My opinion was a bad choice. I don't like top-down zoning, but they did it, we have it, and at the beginning, everybody was told, once you rezone, you're whatever you are, you never can go back to control-free. If we're gonna put it in the matrix, then people need to go back and forth. Because that's gonna confuse, the thing is so confusing now, so let's not make it more confusing by trying to mess this up and add that back in the matrix.
You were trying to stay in order, weren't you, Madam Chair?
I'm sorry?
You were trying to stay in order with them, right?
What's the question?
If control-free is in a zoning district, then should it be added to the matrix?
I mean, to me, it seems like it was top-down zoning that established basically setback requirements.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. I mean, that was
Not
initial, technically, was it top-down zoning?
Yeah, it's technically top-down zoning when you, 2008, put it all down there, and so you overlaid zoning districts everywhere. And control-free district was one of those, but it was a non-zoning zoning district because it didn't really do anything. But
Right.
then in early 2015, I think, you added setbacks to it. So that put some provision in the control-free district in chapter 38, the zoning chapter. Prior to that, though, everything's been subject to the performance standards. So folks will think about those as land use and that zoning, but that's every part of the county. Can't put a sexually oriented business here, can't put a tattoo parlor here, can't put a communication tower there. That just applies ubiquitously everywhere.
But can you put a carport wherever you want?
I'm not going back to the car. So yeah, we added, made it more of a, to answer your question, we made it more of a zoning district when you added the setbacks.
So it really can only be, it's an initial zone, top-down zoning classification, and then from there out, it's citizen initiated.
That's how it's contemplated, that's how it's looked at in the comprehensive plan. So that's why I say it goes back to that change of evaluating what do you want it to be in the comprehensive plan process, and going from there.
I mean, is it a zoning classification? Is it a zoning district? Technically, yes, but if it's initial only, and you can't go back, then I don't think it should be added in matrices.
Yeah, to me, it's definitely not a matrix, strictly on the standpoint of, you got your top down, so, you know, then you got your citizen initiated zones that y'all all have in front of you on there that you choose from. And I think, you know, Coda County is unique on the citizen initiated side of things. It makes things a little, you know, squirrely because we get, well, nobody else does it this way. Well, you know, a lot of councils, aren't scared to do all the zonings. I'd rather give a little bit more rights. I know, you know, certain people think that it's taking away rights. Well, if the citizen initiated and you know you're gonna be in it, and you decide whether you sign to be in it, and you get the mailers, and you still don't get out on it, to me, you're not doing your own homework, and you're, you know, allowing yourself to possibly be in a zone that you don't wanna be in. So, I mean, the top-down zone, whatever you feel about that, that's your own personal belief. To me, the matrix needs to be the citizen-initiated zoning matrix, that I can be anywhere in this chart, as long as that's where I'm at, and the control-free is separate, so we're not sitting here confused, and I think we did a really, really much better job than as it started, especially in that ag scenario where people were like, well, I didn't know. And I if you were asleep in those 3 months, I don't know about you, but when you sign something, I read it. I mean, either it works for you or it doesn't work for you, but when it's your land and you didn't read it, and you got things in the mail and you signed your name to it, you know, I mean, I'm not talking about top down, I'm talking about changing your zones. Or if you buy land and it's in a certain residential district or something like that, that stuff better be disclosed to you. And I know from a realtor standpoint, you get in a lot of trouble if stuff's not disclosed, right, Mike?
Absolutely.
And that stuff has to be disclosed going into it. So I've got people, so I bought a piece of land and I didn't know I couldn't do this to it. And you pull up the documents and sure enough, the realtor did their job like they're supposed to. You know, so as in your district, your land being control-free, if you like it that way, then hang out. We're not trying to force anything on you. We're not land grabbing. That's the whole reason we're looking into the small area zoning. It takes the whole land grab out of it. I thought people would be happy with that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
What was the question? I don't really have any problem with that. The only thing is, I don't want to be part of a lie, and that it's been told. I've asked the farmer, I said, do you realize you can't go back? He said, no, I didn't realize that. And I've had a couple of people that told me that they were lied to when they signed that, and they let it go. So I don't want to be part of the lie. So, every which way it goes, as long as everybody's up front. But I don't want to be putting people into something and lying about it to get them there.
So was that zoning district or matrix?
Do what?
Is that zoning district or matrix? You know what you asked?
No, it was
Yeah, I understood what he said.
So,
He got his little mark in between.
okay.
Wayne? All right.
It ought to be, we need to change the rules to where we can go back to control free. I mean, you know, you get all these options, well, you can do this, or you can do that, and then our zoning things wrote up. Well, as long as you wanna go more restrictive, it's okay, but how about, it's your land, you pay the taxes on it. And you, as long as you ain't, you know, processing nuclear waste or something like that, you ought to be able to, have a say-so in your land. And I was on council, and when we had the big land grab, and, it was just, well, we're gonna ram it down your throat. I was the Lone Ranger, or whatever you wanna call it. Bryce, I think you can't draft me, no one send me to Cuba, so what can you do to me? But it was wrong, and they wronged a lot of people. And we can try to change that, yeah, maybe yes, maybe no. But on this control free, we ought to allow to the people, they pay the taxes, it's their land. And we owe them not just a blank check of what they can do with their land, but we owe them the consideration of saying, okay, we feel like it's your land. And these people that say, well, I don't like what's going on down the street, or I don't like this, or like in Charleston County, well, they're putting fertilizer out at 5 o'clock in the morning, I don't like that. Well, they shut down a bunch of tomato forests for that. It's all about consideration. You can't dictate, well, we're gonna let you do whatever you want to. Yeah, well, that's one thing. But on the other hand, if they're not happy, and they're paying the tax, this is their land, we didn't buy the land, then we at least could have the consideration to say, okay, you wanna go back to control free, well, we ought to have it in the ordinance, okay, we're gonna listen to you. We're gonna do what you say. You're the one paying the taxes, not me, not anybody else. It's just a matter of consideration.
What is an example of a zoning classification that person has moved to and elected to move to themselves, and why do they wanna go back to the control free?
Well, maybe they have plans of, they got a big parcel of land, and maybe control free would allow them to say, I wanna put this type business here, this type here, this type here, and I'm gonna put my chicken house here, providing DHEC says it's okay, because DHEC controls the chicken houses, and maybe I'm gonna put a big pond in back here and farm those ponds, which are, shrimp on steroids.
Prawns.
Yeah.
Prawns.
Yeah, prawns, they're from South America. Anyway, they can have a lot of uses they want, and control free would give them the option of the lot of uses.
And what are they now? What did they change to?
Maybe they were.
No, I mean, like you were saying, this person, what did they change from control free to?
Maybe they thought they wanted to be residential. Well, I don't know, I'm just making something up. Maybe they thought maybe we were.
Okay, so there wasn't a.
So now they wanna go back.
If you've got the mechanism to go between any of the other districts, why is this one?
Well, that's why I was
Not
asking
allowed.
the example to help me understand
I mean,
why.
you don't need to know why somebody wants to change from this district to this district within the matrix.
But
You
if
don't
he's-
even need to know why. Why do you need to know why somebody wants to return to control free?
Cause it would help me understand the issue that the person's into. So I understand why, if they sign to go into an agricultural district and they're stating that they weren't notified and they didn't know what they were doing, but now they wanna go back, that's why I was saying, why in
But
that
what-
zone?
I don't see why you've got an issue with that. If somebody wants to change zones, you don't have a need to know his reason.
Okay, I'm gonna play both sides of the table here. Coming out of control free, as it stands now, it's 200 acres, 51% on 75% of the land, so there's 25% of the land that can be taken whether the owner of that property wants to be zoned or not. To me, that is one situation to where they would want to go back to control free because they didn't want whatever, agricultural, residential, industrial, whatever it may be, that 25% should have the right to go back to control free because they didn't ask for the zoning to start with. They got forced into it for this 200 acre rule that we have in the zoning right now. To me, that's probably one of the only reasons that this would be a good thing to move it and let people go back to it. Ms. Jennings, McMahon deal where they were forced into something, they should have automatically been offered control free back. So that's one reason why it would be a good idea to let people go back to control free. But I agree with Mr. Davis and the others. If you sign the paper and you do what you're supposed to do, and you want to be zoned, then you shouldn't be able to go back. If you've asked for it, you've read all your paperwork, and you've done your due diligence, not the council, and you've done what you wanted and read it, and you actually understand it, go for it, then you've asked for it, you got it. The old saying, be careful what you ask for, you just might get it. They should stay in what they've got, not go back to control free. They can go anywhere else they want to, but they can't go back to their initial zoning. But in the instance this happened, and I'm gonna just say agriculture because those were the bigger lots that were done. They were 25% of those things that could have been people that didn't want to be zoned, that wanted to be left alone, but they got grabbed in because the other people needed 200 acres. Those people should have the opportunity to go back to control free. But, I mean, if you ask for it, you got it.
Madam Chairman, real quick, I think we've gotten way off on this one. The only, we're being asked to plan. What percentage of the county is control-free?
It's over 80% of it.
Over 80% is control-free. And if it was named something else, if it was named general use, we probably wouldn't even be having this discussion. But control-free, those two words don't go together. Control-free. But anyway, we're off the subject with this discussion was if we're as planners trying to plan for the future and 80% plus is not on the matrix, then how do we plan? And that's the only reason this has come up is, whether we can go back or forth, that's another discussion. And I don't see why we can't go back and forth, but that might be a legal thing. But if it needs to go through the comprehensive plan, but it should, to me, in my opinion, be on the zoning matrix because it's 80% of the land. How do we plan when we don't?
It's 80% of the people in this county do not want to be zoned.
It has restrictions on it. It has setback restrictions. It is zoned. It's a
It's
zoning
already
district.
zoned.
Well, you just answered the question.
Well, we've got 6 different opinions. In my opinion, it's a zoning district.
I agree, it's a zoning district. Like I said, for people looking at citizen initiated, I was just trying to separate that out just a little bit so you're not sitting there going, okay, if you click into this bracket, they ain't no.
That's a whole other discussion.
Ain't no clicking
Yeah,
back.
If that needs to be changed, we can change that.
Call the initial top down zone if that'll make everybody happy. Can we change the name of it?
We need to go through the comprehensive plan, because that's the foundation. That's the foundation for it, really, because as it was, when you put in place the control-free district, there was a certain idea in mind. The comprehensive plan gives the footing for all the land use regulations you put in place after it. So That's why I keep going back to that. When it was first contemplated, it was the initial zoning district, but it really wasn't zoned because it was gonna be, every use is going to be allowed. Once you put it in the use matrix, even if you have, everything's permitted by it, you start slipping into, all right, well, let's take that P out. As soon as you take that first P out and make it a conditional use in the control-free district, then I think you've run afoul, probably before that, but certainly then, of the comprehensive plan. So I think you can get to wherever y'all wanna go, but the comprehensive plan is the horse that needs to draw this.
Okay, well, now that we know that over 80% of the county still remains control-free, now we can talk about small area zoning. What's the appropriate size? And I think this whole conversation about small area zoning came from the 200-acre requirement. And so, would it be better to have that number smaller? Yes or no?
Madam
And
Chair,
why?
aren't we the only county in the state that has a area requirement?
Okay, well, that's where I was getting kind of confused and I had to get straightened out on this. What I was thinking about was when someone owns a parcel and they want to rezone it, there shouldn't be a limit on the size of that parcel for that rezoning request. And a good example that Mr. Mulder had reminded me of was when Dr. Oliver came and wanted to rezone a section of his property as commercial so he could build those storage units. Where is it written in our code that that is permitted?
Individual rezoning.
Individual rezoning.
It's called the subsequent rezoning, I believe, in 3811, I want to say.
Okay, so if I wanted to rezone just 5 out of my 20-plus acres, I should be able to, and I am able to, according to our code, yes or no?
Yes, so long as you meet, there may be a minimum lot size issue, but that's kind of on the side, but yes, it's parcel by parcel, correct.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to ensure was available. Does that make sense?
Yes, it shouldn't be any area requirement. It's your parcel, you do what you want to.
Right, and that's written into our code. So
So
this
some of
small
the-
area rezoning is when a group of property owners wants to get together and zone their area. Should they still be required to have what's in our code now is the 200-acre
No, it should be none.
requirement?
None.
Or should it be smaller?
Should be whatever they want to do. I mean, we can't hold somebody back, they're an equal taxpayer for their, if they wanna do something else with it. It just be, you don't have to have 200 acres, you have whatever you paying taxes on.
As it
May I
stands right
step
now.
in? The small area rezoning was allowed to basically provide for a majority controlled zoning area by allowing 51% of the people who own 75% of the land to pull 25% of people in with them. By changing the small area zoning, you're doing away with it because you're making it 100% of the people. If you're gonna do that, you might as well do away with the small area rezoning, because if 100% of the 5 people wanna rezone, then you just do 5 rezonings whenever they're ready.
If you just eliminate the acreage requirement, each person could
Right. If you're gonna-
rezone their
If
parcel.
you're gonna
and-
say 100%
and-
have to do it, then 100% can just rezone their own parcel by themselves. I mean, you don't have to have a group do it.
Well,
They can do that now.
If it's Etta's property, I don't pay Etta's taxes, she pays the
Right,
tax.
but just do away with the small area rezoning if you're gonna make it 100% anyway.
I mean, they can
I
get,
don't think any group of neighbors should be able to drag another neighbor into a zoning
Well,
situation.
the amendment that we put before council, or you guys put before council, did away with that. It made it 100% requirement. So you and I are saying the same thing. We do this all the time. For some reason, you wanna
Well-
fight me, but we're saying the same thing.
No land grab,
majority
the
of council
land
voted
grab.
that amendment down.
The majority of you said we don't want them to be 100% in agreement. Well, here's the thing, if you're gonna make them be 100% in agreement, you don't need small area rezoning, you just need rezoning. We're saying the same thing.
The land grab is gone.
Yeah, land grab would have been gone
Well, it's
if
not
you had
gone.
passed
Yeah,
that
sorry.
ordinance.
Yeah, well, that was.
That's the problem, the land grab is still in place. Somebody could get a vested right in that zoning by putting an application in now before you amend the ordinance.
And take
We were
somebody-
trying to do away with the land grab, because it required 100% of the people participating to agree. What I'm telling you is, if you're gonna require a small area rezoning of 6 people to have 100% agreement, then those 6 people can just do a rezoning by themselves, and you do 6 rezonings.
Well, that's what it ought to be, that's their
Do away-
property.
That's what I'm telling you,
But
do
it's
away
not-
with the small
but
area.
we were talking about before, it was cut it from 200 acres to 100 acres to 50 acres. Well, still, I mean, if you ain't got 50 acres,
The only problem you'll run into is what if those 6 people all want something different?
how about the individual person? The
what I
individual
said.
person,
What if
it's
those
their
6 people
land,
want something
they
different?
approach the zoning, they wanna do it.
The problem with that is, you may run into a situation like you had with the Jennings McMahon. You may have 2 neighbors who want a different zoning classification, but one may not fall within the guidelines of that land development regs. I think one of the benefits of the small area rezoning is really your characteristics of your development should all be similar to prevent a strip joint from being able to be located right next door to I don't know, well, they can't do that anyway. There's state guidelines for that, but next to a house, let's call it, or something. So the idea is, you wanna kinda keep the land use consistent in some areas, so you're not impeding on your neighbor's rights. So I think that's one of the arguments to the small area rezoning, is so that you can better fall within the guidelines of the future land use map, which is what the Comprehensive Planning Act requires you to use whenever you make a rezoning determination. But from a procedural standpoint, it's not needed. Now, I'll let Mr. Rubin correct me on that, but, it's not needed. If it takes 100%, then let each one of them do it on their own.
That's what it ought to be, it's their property.
That's my practical argument.
You know, it's practical, but the architecture was, you can only come out of control free by a couple of different methods. And the one that was used with agriculture was the petition method with 200 acres. So because that was cumbersome, and perhaps folks could come, be dragged in, although it didn't happen that last time, someone could be involuntarily
It
brought
happened
in.
a lot, David.
Well, I think y'all pulled out everyone who didn't
Not
wanna
in-
come in.
Not in agriculture, it didn't.
And that,
happen in
it may have happened before, but on that one example, I think everyone who wanted to get out, y'all let them out. But in any event, so planning commission said, all right, well, let's change that, let's make it so it's all voluntary, nobody gets dragged in to being rezoned, out of control free, and let's lower down the acreage. And so the debate in planning commission was, do we wanna have it at 100 or 50, or just parcel by parcel? And they said 50 to you, but that's the method that would be most commonly used to get out of control free. The rezoning is parcel by parcel as it is now, is only once you've gotten out of control free. So now those folks who were rezoned ag back then a year ago, can do it parcel by parcel. And so that's subsequent to the initial rezoning. And that's why the control free is littered throughout this ordinance as the initial zoning classification. It has special, it's just treated differently. That makes sense? I'll see I'm glad it's taken me time to watch, as you can. Look at Jim.
If I may say something real quick, just as something for council to think about. Mr. McCall had said earlier that it's everyone's land, they should be able to do what they want. I'm a big fan of that personally. But then he put a caveat to that and said unless it's a nuclear waste facility next door. So if there is a caveat to what somebody can do with their own land, then we need to be real cautious about saying you can zone or rezone willy-nilly. And in my opinion, this is why. Okay, my neighbor went to council and asked for a rezoning to do X, Y, Z. Now I've gone to ask for a rezoning in something entirely different, and you said no. Why did you tell my neighbor yes and you told me no? Probably because I wanted to build a nuclear waste facility next door. But in all seriousness, we don't know what the absurdity might be, and I think that all of a sudden, you tell me no and you told my neighbor yes, now we've got an issue, I think. And I'm not an attorney, but I would think that would be a problem.
The reason for any type of 50 acre plus or whatever, to me, has to do with my neighbor rezoning his commercial, which he could do that, right? Let's say I own 10 acres, he owns 10 acres, and we're in a residential type area.
But it's control free.
It's control free, we're both control free,
Parcel by parcel.
right, so he can tune, pretty much do in what he wants to a certain limit of legality of his land.
Essentially, y'all have to approve it, and your approval has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, the land use map, and the future land use map.
But
But with those, yes.
the goal of any kind of the 200, I have, 200 acres, obviously, that's a huge parcel of land. But the goal of something of that is to have some type of, I guess, solidity in the county, so we're not like bing, 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 bing. I mean, I can just see it just from a realtor standpoint going crazy, and as a builder standpoint, going crazy, because I think it messes, I'm just trying to think through that. I live on a large piece of land, so it doesn't, I'm control free. It didn't change. That was just my choice. I wasn't,
But seeing that the county is over 80% control free, doesn't the realtor have that problem right now?
Well,
with all these sporadic things?
By us not having visual zoning and by us not knowing what somebody may do in the future, I think it poses problems for several people. One, going back to the agriculture scenario, somebody zoning themselves agricultural is a protection for them. And the reason it's a protection for them is the neighbor comes in, he sells his lot to a developer that builds 200 homes in it. Those 200 people now complain to their county commissioner and say, the guy that's running the farm, the cows smell or the something happens or this or that. And all of a sudden, while yes, there are farm regulations, county council now starts controlling the road use or starts controlling the spraying times. And just like you'd mentioned, the tomato farms got shut down. Now he gets shut down because the developer built 200 homes. As a realtor, if I'm selling that home, I can say, hey, the guy next door is zoned agricultural. He has a right to do these things. If you smell cow mess in the morning, you've bought in this neighborhood. Just be aware of that. I think if people start changing in and out, and you do things in too small of an area to go from control-free to anything or back and forth, I think that people set themselves up for the guy who's trying to protect himself through zoning is going to get in a world of hurt when somebody bigger or more votes come in next door.
I worry the problem just enhances I moved my 5 acres from control-free to this to protect myself and learned, just like y'all are stating down there, that I didn't truly protect myself, and now I want to go back. And, it's just like, I just don't want the back and forth. We don't have the staff for that. We don't have, it's just, it's like a deck of cards. We can't, 2,500 people wanted to be rezoned. I don't even know what we'd do.
Well, I was gonna say, since 80% of it, or 74% of it is control-free, I don't think you're gonna have a stampede to get rezoned out of control-free.
Well, I don't think so either.
But,
I don't either.
But the agree. Don't have the 200
At a
acres
stampede, I would want to stay
that
control-free.
want to be zoned.
that's why we came up with the 50 acres.
The 50 acres would give them the ability to do it.
It was easier than 200, it seemed like. Well, sorry, you didn't, but the rest of us, they did debate, weeks, and I think in some cases, because we kept putting it aside and saying, let's talk about this some more. At least bringing it down so that someone with a smaller area could get his neighbors together, and the county wouldn't be holding 10 rezoning rehearings. They would be hearing one for 10 acres or 25 acres or 50 acres. That was more reasonable, not the 200 that is truly visionary, that's, setting aside a use for a large area of land. But it gives those people the opportunity to protect themselves if they want to.
So, Mr. McCall, y'all are saying no small areas, no size.
Yeah, because
Everything else you were.
because if I use Etta for example, she got 5 acres.
Right.
And she decides that she wants to do something like fix cars. And so I'm gonna put one of her carports up, and she's gonna fix cars at her carport.
Well, then she needs to stay control-free.
Yeah.
But suppose she is in, residential, and she wants to be zoned where she can, like Dr. Oliver, commercial, where she can fix cars in her carport.
Then she can submit a rezoning application for a commercial.
But it ought to be
application.
her, on hers, and not, Ms. Kamic only has, she's gotta have 25 acres, well, suppose she ain't got.
Not on a subsequent rezoning. If she is an individual property owner and she is in control-free, and she wants to repair cars, then she needs to keep her rear end right in
Well,
control-free.
suppose she's in residential, and
Then she
wants-
comes in for a subsequent rezoning request, just like Dr. Oliver did when he wanted to do his storage units and do a commercial.
Then why are
So
we
he
even
can-
talking about why don't we just go to that and not have the requirement, the 25, 50 acres or whatever it is?
I don't know, that's what I'm trying to ask you guys, that's
And then-
what you're trying to figure out.
And then we eliminate that whole problem. Why should I say Etta can't do that? Well, I ain't paying Etta's taxes.
Because in that case, it's in the smack dab middle of a residential neighborhood, and it's just, it causes more problems than it does.
Okay, then why don't?
Yeah, but then wouldn't it be rejected?
It would be
Yes.
rejected.
Okay,
That's
so,
right.
that's why we have a board that makes these
That's right.
decisions, right?
Right.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I think at this point, we had, maybe 2 meetings ago, council meetings ago, you postponed that
Yeah.
proposed ordinance that had the 50 acres. We can put it back on for the 7th. Is that 50 acres, Mr. McCall or someone else could make a motion to change that to individual parcel, y'all can debate that and accept the amendment or not. And if you don't, then you vote on the 50, or you can send it back to the planning commission. So it's there for y'all to make that decision, and they did the deliberation on it and sent it up to y'all. And so I think we're ready for council to move on that. We just obviously need to do it in a county council meeting.
Okay, fine. Destination Oconee, you got the priority ranking of key recommendations in front of you? You have a copy of that too? Okay.
I had one question just on the very first one. Can we dictate to a municipality an overlay?
No.
So number one is not it's not a priority because we can't do that.
What says destination?
Yeah, this was a recommendation of an independent group on what can be done. The citizen committee that was appointed to prioritize, put that as from a whole county standpoint as a priority, but that's not anything that we can force.
Are you
certainly
asking
help.
us to rank them, or are you just saying we need to take on those top 3?
Well, we need to consider, they have a list of 9 objectives here, and seeing that most of them we can't afford, one way or the other, we should come up with the top 3 items to get them to, focus on those 3 rather than all of these.
I think you should start with number 9, because we haven't talked about this yet. Create a 3-year action plan for managing growth. So that went way over everybody's head. You with me? You didn't chuckle with me.
Just do 1 year at a time.
Why are we asking the planning commission to rank Destination Oconee's recommendations? I mean, this is separate, totally separate commission.
They're totally separate commissions, but in fact, what they're doing to a certain extent has some overlaps, and we were just considering that their input might be valuable in sorting through their recommendations.
I've got a question.
Mm-hmm.
We're, as a county body, we're not involved with any kind of zoning stuff in the towns or any sign ordinances in the towns, or why are we even involved with this in the towns?
Well, that would put out 1, 4, and 5 would be
Yeah,
out of
that's
our.
Destination Oconee is an oversee of the entire county, and those cities are part of this county.
Yeah. Well, the cities are parties to this Destination Oconee plan. They've all adopted it, right?
Yeah, when I looked at this list, you know, trying to mesh what they're doing with what you're doing, with what we're doing, where we want to go, where we want to be. You know, I kind of circled 2 and 3.
I think what Andy was saying is that we've been told as a planning commission to stay out of the cities. And
And yes, so we are staying out of the cities, but if you read 2 and 3, it has nothing to do with the cities and everything to do with the county.
I think 3 addresses that dreaded word corridors.
Mm-hmm.
For-
Yeah.
If you're going to improve public access anywhere, you have to consider your key entrances and exits from the county.
2, 3, and 6 is something we can work on.
I would think Mr. Shirley, could he not give you that condition assessment of public access for the, maybe not in detail, but it seemed like he could give you some of it.
He's shaking his head, yes.
He's shaking his head, yes, okay.
I don't see any of these being that costly. I mean, certainly in staff time, but it's just a matter of I think we can do all these. It's just
have
a
we
matter
not
of saying
already
which one we
worked
do
through
first.
a county sign ordinance?
We're working on it.
We're working, I don't think we've got it completely, but
We did.
we did get it
Have we
done.
sent it on?
It's been passed.
No, okay, yeah, we got that.
Well done.
So we've done number 5.
So scratch through number 5, it's already been done.
All right, well, we're good.
I think that is also in addition to wayfinding signage as well.
Yeah.
Driving traffic to tourism spots, businesses, things like that. So I think that's more encompassing than just a sign ordinance.
I think number 6, the state is already preempted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is that the letter, or is that coming from?
So right now, we've scratched through 1, 4, 5, 6, and which one?
7.
As things has already been done, or we have no say over.
But 6 could be a corridor, right? Highway 11?
Highway 11 is a state designated scenic highway, and so if you want to lobby the state to put different things on there, then that would be something you could do, but it's a state statute, and so I don't know that we can do anything within that scenic highway that they preempted that field. So
Totally. So we can't have a
Anything
less
more
restrictive
restrictive.
or more restrictive.
Right.
Okay.
So would you agree that if they got to work on any of these, 2 and 3 would be the more significant ones? From our perspective anyway, from all of our perspective?
2,
2 and 3?
2 and 3.
conduct.
Okay, well, that was easy. Gee, something had to be easy, no?
We should have started with that one.
Yeah, we should
So-
have started with that one.
We need to work on the comprehensive plan.
So, may I ask this question to council? Here's a couple of new assignments, which is great. We love that direction. We've been given the assignment of doing some other things, which as we're doing those are saying, oh, well, don't do that, because now we have to make a decision as council about doing so. Should we, please, when you do give us direction, continue giving us direction until we can actually make something happen?
You want what?
If I may, number 3, we just said that perhaps public access would be dedicated by corridors, and yet earlier we said we don't have an answer for the corridor question. So could you perhaps suggest that we do have a generic corridor ordinance that could then be modified to fit if we build it with 123 between Ingalls and Clemson in view of what we don't want to happen, and let's see if there's anything that we can help with, and then take that same general ordinance and say, what can we do now to help 123 from Ingalls to Tractor Supply in Seneca or Walmart in Seneca, and then do the same thing from Tractor Supply to the Georgia state line, and then do the same thing from Mariner Healthcare to Golden Corner Commerce Park or the Fairplay entrance, and the same thing 130, the scenic road up through the mountains to Duke Power. In other words, if we could come up with a generic ordinance that said, we want to try to increase internal access in areas of development. We want to try to increase saving of shade trees and green space in developments. A generic something that says that the corridors will work towards controlling, not controlling traffic, but making traffic safer through planning. And then we could apply those ordinances as needed in whatever highway we were applying them to. Instead of just saying, no, you can't do, we're not gonna tell you what to do about corridors, and yet the number 3 thing right here says we need corridors if we're going to help public access.
Do we really need green space?
No, absolutely not.
That's gonna infringe on people's property rights if we tell them they gotta have green space.
When trees are overrated anyway.
Yeah.
They do get in the way.
We need to put up more
signs,
billboards, I
but-
think.
I'm sorry, I'm always the green space.
I love it.
If I could reach him, I'd have kicked him just then, but I can't reach him, so.
You want me to do it for you?
Yes.
Yeah, would you mind kicking in for us, Scott?
I just hate to walk out of this meeting, having sat here now 2 hours and 12 minutes, with no answer on the biggest thing on the plan.
I mean, my direction is very, cleaning the corridor, and the reason for what I like in it, my biggest issue is the things that we usually demand of a developer of a large parcel of land. From everything that I have seen, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mulder, but we generally help with certain parts of that development of the property because we want to see the development of the property. So whether it's sewer or, C funds, I mean, there's multitude of things. Like if we're saying, hey, you've got to have this ingress egress and it's gonna cost you $200,000, I have seen prior councils help that developer because the project was worth so many millions of dollars. So, I mean, I've got people that have said, well, you're gonna cost the developer money. Not necessarily, because when I look at, it's actually more usable property if it's done properly. Instead of having 20 cuts on a 150 acre plat, we've got one cut all the way through. Buildings are allowed to come closer. It actually makes more parking. If you take like the Home Depot area with all of the restaurants, the Taco Bell, the Chick-fil-A, and you take out every cut through there, and you have one entrance to that whole area, the parking triples in that entire area. And, if you go into those areas and you try to park now, well, a lot of that parking is curbs that's designated by DOT. And what we're suggesting is less of that because it would be actual parking instead of 28 different cuts and stop and go traffic.
Tell you what additionally costs the developer money using that example is where they have to go back to the drawing table because somebody said, yeah, we don't like that decision. And they go back to the architect and they go back to the planner and they come back and make a decision, ask for a decision again, and oh, you need to go back to the drawing board again. That typically is where a developer gets hurt. A developer, as long as he knows where the rules are because they're in black and white, he's good with it. It doesn't hurt business. Actually, it's a farce and to even believe that it hurts business because we tell businesses already, if you're going to build, you have to build under a building code that's either a state or national building code. So we're already telling a developer what they have to do. We're just helping refine that down so they don't have to keep going back to the drawing board because somebody keeps coming up with a different opinion.
And we've been out over 2:15. If we're gonna go much longer, I might need a potty break.
15 minutes.
If you think we're gonna wrap it up soon.
Wrapping it up, multifamily housing. What do we need, exactly do we need to discuss on this?
That right there is gorgeous.
Yep.
What Mr. Chapman, we had asked him to come up with as simple a wording as possible that would allow multi-family housing in as many places within the county as possible, without coming up with a whole new ordinance and a whole new list of stuff that they had to deal with.
And he did great.
And he did, I think it's a beautiful job. I mean, he was concerned that maybe there's a glitch here and a glitch there, but it's very simple. Very straightforward. It's very much what, the developer has looked at everything else and understands all the other building codes there for bid, then he can look at this and say, oh, and I can do multifamily housing there. But if I do, because it allows me not to look at lot lines in this single building that I'm gonna build.
Okay, so that's, in order to make this happen, this change was all that was necessary?
I believe that's what I think that's what we asked him to do. We have not had, actually, we just now saw this as well, so we have not been able to discuss it in a planning commission meeting. But this is what we challenged him with, and so you're seeing it like we are.
Okay.
But I believe that is correct.
Okay, well, that's fine, that's good. All right, anything else real quick, so Scott can go to the bathroom?
Well, I had a bottle of water before and then this bottle of water, so.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.